The Tabernacle Township Committee meeting, August 26, 2019. Committeeman Yates is ill. He will not be joining us. Committeeman Moore is on vacation in Disney World. He will not be joining us. Please stand for a flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We have a sunshine notice. This meeting is called pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of August the 26th was sent to the Central Record, Burlington County Times, and Courier Post. Posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall and has remained continuously posted as required notices under statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. We have roll call. We have Deputy Mayor Brown.
Here.
Committeeman Lee.
Here.
Committeeman Moore. Committeeman Yates. Mayor Barton.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shorten. Okay, public comment on agenda items only. If anyone has any comments on agenda items, you have 3 minutes. Please come forward, state your name. Jim?
Jim Jones, 16 Homewood Way. Question regarding ordinance 2019-8.
Which one, Jim?
2019-8.
8.
Do I have it correct in my assumption that in section 7B, the Hawthorne Road drainage project is the area between the community center and the fire company?
Yes.
I hope so. It's tough to float a road through there.
Anyone else in the public?
Thank you. Stuart Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. 2 comments. One, I see this agenda has an executive session at item 9. Public comment follows at item 10, followed by adjournment, which is item 11. In the past, it's been the committee's practice to let the professionals go prior to executive session, which makes them unavailable to hear the public comments, which may pertain to their area of expertise. I know that's happened more than once. So I'm suggesting that all professionals be retained through adjournment, just a full meeting, just as all of us usually stay here for the full meeting. 2, I wonder if, Mayor Barton, if you'll be reporting on your meeting with the Assistant Commissioner of DOT, Joe Bertoni, regarding Carranza Road. That's pertinent to ordinance 2019-8. And it also gets to the question of what is the plan for completing Carranza Road? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anyone else in the public? Mr. Brooks?
Moore's Meadow Road. Good evening, everybody. I too have 2 statements or questions. I noticed that the format of the agenda has changed a little bit, or there's an addition of explanatory statement for the ordinances. Who's writing them and who's approving the statements? I'd like to know who does that. And I'd also like to know regarding the executive session, how long Ms. Barber has been acting LDB secretary, and is she also acting office clerk, and for how long that's been going on? So on an individual level, is she both acting LDB secretary and office clerk, and for how long? And I think that's all I have for public comment number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Eddie?
And just a question on Eddie Kennard, 42 Pinecone Corporate, also speaking as fire chief at this point, asking a question. Is that bond ordinance the one that was originally the chief's vehicle was going to be purchased out of, that was on here? I'm just asking, I don't see it listed, it's not listed as part of the stuff, so I heard it was going to be on a bond, so I was wondering if that was, I can't read without my glasses. I was wondering if that was the bond that was it, so that was my only question, but I don't see it on there.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Anyone else in the public? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion and we'll address answers to the questions as we shift to the different professionals.
You said again, I didn't hear that.
We'll answer questions to Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, and Andy when we get to comment with our professionals. Okay, ordinance 2019-6 is the second reading of the ordinance to create the position of purchasing agent in the Township of Tabernacle. This ordinance creates the position of a purchasing agent. Affidavit of publication was presented. And we're going to open this to the public. Mrs. Brooks?
Why do we need a purchasing agent? I'd like to hear the answer to that during the discussion on the second reading of that ordinance. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I just would like to know why we need it. What are the conditions that give rise to the need of a purchasing agent, and what kinds of things would that person do? Because we've never had one before, and Deb Kramer has done everything, so I don't see why we're adding another job at another taxpayer cost.
Okay.
That's all.
Anyone else in the public have any question on this ordinance? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public portion. I'm going to answer a question about what the duties and responsibilities of a new purchasing agent will do.
Sure, I'll speak about it.
Okay, Ronnie, thank you.
Basically, the QPA, or the Qualified Purchasing Agent, basically takes all the responsibilities of reviewing bids and all purchases. It does allow us to raise the bid threshold so that we don't have the expense for having to go out to bid, only get quotations up to $40,000. So it would reduce advertising costs, would reduce legal costs for reviewing bids, and it's basically a cost savings in the end, should be.
It's also the direction the state has been pushing municipalities to move to get a qualified purchasing agent. They've made it an advantage to get one. What previous
Speak louder.
necessary to add to the CFO's expertise also.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Ronnie, does it allow you to change the threshold?
What's that?
Does it allow you to change the threshold?
Yes.
We've actually been talking about this for a few years now, to do this in order to raise that bid threshold. So this is something it's old, but it's not brand new.
What was it that motivated the change at this point versus 2 years ago?
We had someone in staff that was willing to do it, that was going to be with us for long enough time to make it worth the investment in it.
And that was who?
Kim Smith.
At this point, she's not willing to do it anymore?
No, she's willing to do it. We didn't have anybody who was willing to do it.
We didn't have a qualified person.
Okay. I'm trying to fill in holes that we
Yeah.
may get later.
There was
That's
no one on staff that had the certification.
Right, but the ideally is you're able to change your threshold, which is a much bigger competitive. Hopefully that answers questions from you.
Give a motion?
So moved.
A second?
It's going to be a busy night tonight. I'll second.
Roll call?
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. 2019-7, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 2, Administration, by adding Section 32, Executive Session Minutes. This ordinance replaces Resolution 2018-90, amends Chapter 2 to include Section 32, Executive Session Minutes, and creates the Minutes Review Subcommittee in a proactive attempt to ensure the prompt availability of closed session minutes to the public. Affidavit of publication was presented. Open to the public. Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, give me a second. Okay. Since you didn't answer my question, Fran Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road, on the explanatory statements, The explanatory statement for this ordinance, without having to read the whole thing and using up my time, says this ordinance replaces resolution 2018-90, ... Section 32 executive session minutes, and creates the minutes review subcommittee in a proactive attempt to ensure the prompt availability of closed session minutes. Now, honestly, guys, I can't believe that anyone in their right mind would put proactive. It is far from being proactive. Maybe you wrote it, Mr. Lang. Maybe the clerk added it under your direction, or maybe Mr. Barton suggested it. But there is nothing proactive about this closed session ordinance whatsoever, because I had to take you to court to get you to conform with the OPMA that you have been violating for years regarding closed session minutes, which cost this township, not including Mr. Lang's bills, those haven't had a chance to add those up, but you're probably going over $35,000 at this point for something that you should have taken care of years ago, but you don't want to. So when you talk about proactive, had you been doing, and the clerk should have been doing OPMA, been in conformance of OPMA, if you had been in conformance with OPMA, that would be proactive. Not saying that the consent order that you're ultimately bound to makes you proactive, because that was enforced by the court, and it was enforced because I had to take you to court to get you to conform with the OPMA, which you've been in violation for. So now, at the last meeting, I brought up the problem with at first reading, the ordinance. And I know that Mr. Lang contacted my attorney to ask, he sent him the ordinance, I think it was around July 12th, this proposed ordinance that I commented on at the end of the meeting on July 22nd, asking for my attorney's opinions. Now, whether this was because Mr. Lang, you wanted to keep your reader running, but my attorney did get back to you. It was on the 22nd, but you had an opportunity to be quote-unquote proactive at the meeting and to say, we've got a conflict in this, and we need to resolve the conflict. And my attorney gave you a suggestion, a very legitimate suggestion, for correcting the ordinance. But you sat there silently with your meter running. So had you been proactive, you would have said right at the meeting, hey, we got to correct this right now. You don't need Fran Brooks, who doesn't have a law degree, to say that you got a conflict with your ordinance. It's your job, Mr. Lang, to do that. And to be proactive, you need to stop violating both OPRA and OPMA. So you got a consent order in front of you, and that you signed this, you agreed to the consent order, you signed the consent order, and you should take this word proactive out of here. It's an embarrassment. And you know I'm going to write about it. So you should take a proactive role and get it out of there. Because you're not proactive, Ms. Barber, and you, Mr. Lang, aren't proactive, nor is this committee, because you wouldn't have committed all the violations that you've committed for years.
Okay, thank you.
If you were proactive. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the public? Mr. Brooks.
Stuart Brooks, Woods Meadow Road. I'm not as familiar with this draft ordinance as the committee members, Mr. Lang, or my wife. What I believe is at issue here is that the consent order is pretty clear in saying that the meeting of this subcommittee has to be on a regular basis. I think it's quarterly. I'm not sure. Whatever the details are, I'm sure they're under your control. But the ordinance says that it'll meet on an as-needed basis. That's the conflict. And it would seem that the consent order, which has been entered, which you all agreed to, because otherwise it would have been by consent of both parties. If the consent order is clear, then it should just follow that the ordinance should track the consent order. And it doesn't. At least that's my understanding. It doesn't. So how it could proceed to second reading, I don't know, but it sure shouldn't be adopted unless it conforms with the consent order. That would be purposeless. It would not meet your purposes in approving the consent order, nor would it meet the other party's purposes of approving the consent order. and it would be in violation of the judge's order itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anyone else from the public? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion. Anyone from the committee have any comments on this ordinance?
I'd actually like Peter to address Mr. Brooks' comment, if you don't mind.
Sure. The court never found that the township practices were violative of the Open Public Meetings Act or Open Public Records Act. In an effort to be conciliatory and to resolve the matters, the township agreed to go ahead and proactively pass a resolution to address it and just make it abundantly clear for future committees that this is a practice that is preferred. So it certainly was proactive in the context of resolving the litigation. There is, to my knowledge, no conflict with the consent order. And as far as the modification that was suggested by Mr. Lewis had indicated that he felt that paragraph 2 and paragraph 11 conflicted in that they could require the subcommittee to meet less than quarterly. But what I think is missing is the idea that the section 2 indicates that the MRS or the committee will meet on an as-needed basis. And then what's required in section 11 is that they shall review the minutes on a quarterly basis. So the two are logically consistent because review and meet aren't the same thing. So I'm comfortable with the language, not only as consistent with the consent order, but also as not preventing any conflict in its interpretation.
Any other questions for the committee? Okay, hearing none, have a motion?
So moved.
Second? We'll make the second. The roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mayor Barton?
Yes.
May I ask Mr. Lee why you voted no?
Because I didn't hear the complete components of your explanation of the questions that were raised.
You didn't hear me?
I
Do you
was
want me to
out.
repeat myself?
I was out of the room, and I wasn't in a position to be able to respond to it. And I didn't feel as though I had heard exactly your response. I didn't think it was fair to vote on something that I wasn't here for, the complete answer.
I'm happy to repeat myself.
At this point, we've had the vote, it's voted 2-1, so I think we're done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 2019-8, first reading. This is a bond ordinance authorizing the completion of various capital improvements and the acquisition of various capital equipment in and for the Township of Tabernacle, appropriating the sum of $1,130,000, authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds or bond anticipation notes of the Township of Tabernacle in the aggregate principal amount of up to $1,073,500, making certain determinations and covenants and authorizing certain related actions in connection with the foregoing. The ordinance is being introduced on first reading to address our necessary drainage and road repairs in the Township of Tabernacle. The roads Laurel Drive and Pano Court are included in this ordinance because it is cost effective to do the drainage and road improvements at the same time. Work Neck Road is based on the condition of the road. However, other roads may be considered for substitution after discussion by the Township Committee and possible discussion further at the next workshop meeting on September 9th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. Any substitution for roads or drainage made by the Township Committee would not be a significant change to require re-advertisement of the ordinance on first reading. Also included in this ordinance is the purchase of backhoe with accessories to replace a 25-year-old machine which is used for maintenance of Tabernacle Township stormwater facilities. The public hearing will be September 23rd, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. Can I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, resolutions 2019-92 authorizing special emergency appropriation for a sinkhole on Oriental Drive, or Oriental Way, I'm sorry. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion required?
That was, if you don't mind, Mr. Kramer, could you just explain what you needed necessarily? We know, but.
We had a sinkhole about the size of an automobile that occurred near the drain, which is over top of the stream crossing. That is the access to the 6 homes that are on the way. There was some displaced block, both inlets, which are about 15 to 18 foot deep. We were concerned over whether additional sinkhole would develop. We had the engineers staff out to look at it, and based on trapping 6 residents behind no other way to get in and get out of their homes, we declared it an emergency, and it was repaired next day. So, Ford and the company met with them that afternoon and
Martin's texting.
mobilized and
Illegal.
filled it with flowable fill and repaired the inlets at the bottom of the stream. So there was no, and then paid the next day.
You paid it the next day.
They paid it the following day after they made the repair. 2 days later it was paid. The flowable fill had hardened and was secured.
So it wasn't a concern about sinking even after that?
No.
Sometimes you have to really, you can't, I mean, it's gotta
They,
settle before you pay it.
they dug around the hole before that to make sure they had a good bottom on it. Sealed where the dirt had been going, and tamped it down before they put the flowable fill.
Any other questions? Roll call?
I'm sorry, Ms. Roll call? Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barr?
Yes. Resolution 2019-93 authorizing the increase of the bidding threshold and appointing a qualified purchasing agent, Kim Smith.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barr?
Yes. Resolution 2019-94 authorizing preliminary approval for a property that requires no municipal cost share, RT Eckerd Farms LLC. So motion.
So moved.
Second?
Doug, you want to explain how many acres this is and it's being preserved?
Lot 1 is 54 acres, and Lot 2 is approximately
95?
yeah, I think 98 acres, yes.
98?
Yep.
Just for the public, could you make a reference of where these lots and lots are located?
They are off of Metro Lake Road, between Town Hall and Route 206 to the north side of the road. The one side was the Cupola farm at one point in time, and the other was the Fletchers. They had been combined probably 20 years ago by Mr. Conti. Larry and Joe had farmed them for a number of years, and they had sold it to Mr. Eckerd a short while ago. And so it is ground that butts up to the side of the church property, Holy Eucharist Church, and then wraps around, comes out, links up with the farm, where the lawn is on, meets up to the side of it. And goes back all the way to the edge of the end of Wind Road. Comes all the way across there.
Thank you. Roll call?
Doug, do you ever get that? I have a question.
Good.
Doug, do you ever get those drainage issues squared away in that backside of
The, what issue?
the drainage problem back here in the corner of the church lot?
I think they have. They may have configured how they slope the ground slightly, but I have not heard anything more about it for a while. So I think before Joe sold it, he was working on that.
Yeah, he was concerned when I remember talking to him about it. I was only on the LDB at that point, it was a long time ago, but there were concerns regarding,
I believe they got that settled between,
did they do that when the solar panels went up, I guess?
I think so. I think at that time they reconfigured the drainage.
That's all I have, Jim.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-95, authorizing the governing body certification of the annual audit. A motion? Second?
Second.
Any discussion required?
No.
Rodney, you want to add anything?
No, at the next meeting, next month, I'll have a corrective action plan for the audit comment that's in there. The audit comment was just late payment of pension payments.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-96, authorizing the disposal of personal property, computer equipment.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion required?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Resolution 2019-97, authorizing submission of County of Burlington documents for final reimbursement of grant funding. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Doug, you want to talk, this goes back to 2016, right?
The grant was from 2016, it was our 2018 park project. And we've completed that. It was the addition of the dugouts at Patty Vogler Field. The remaining ones that went down on the previous project. And also the shelters that are over the picnic tables at both playgrounds.
Any questions from the committee? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Approval of the bills, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Approval of minutes, July 22nd, 2019, regular meeting. For the motion?
So moved.
What is it?
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
No, I just do it.
Okay, seconded by Lee.
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, reports, Mr. Dovey.
Just a couple of things. We prepared the flat road, are at the bid, and we'll be receiving those bids on the 4th of September. So we'll have that for your next meeting to consider, assuming that the bids go well. Also, we've been working on the drainage projects to get those ready to go, and we've finished plans for drainage repairs at Laurel Road, Richter and Moore, and Old Indian Mills Road as well. So we're going to be getting ready, working with Doug to come up with a bidding schedule for those as well.
Again, Flyett Road, the bids are coming back to 4th.
Yes.
I guess you'll make a recommendation for that. I believe our workshop at the 9th.
Yes.
When would that be done and that road be back open?
Well, our intent is to get it awarded at your next meeting on the 9th so we can get the contractor out there to get started right away. So I'm hoping within 30 days we'll get out there, and it's not going to take a long time to do, but there are a couple head walls involved, so there's a little bit of lead time on some of those items of work, but I'm hoping to get them out there within 30 days so it'll be wrapped up this fall early.
So maybe middle October?
Yeah, I'm thinking end of October probably.
End of October? So could you notify the schools so that they're aware that road's going to be closed that long?
Okay, we'll give them the timeframe. They
They already know?
that they probably again that and expected it to be longer when it occurred, and then it probably wouldn't be open for the start of the school year, but I will now that we have a time frame, we will give them an update, both transportation departments, Lebanese and Tabernacle.
Then we're looking into October, so we're looking at,
Yeah.
We'll know better once we receive bids next week.
Okay, good.
About our contract.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Mr. Dovey? Okay, Mr. Kramer.
We have been working on sinkholes. There's been 5 major sinkholes on Bird Trail that were within Tabernacle. We've been doing them in-house in the department. Probably should be finished with them by Thursday of this week. We are moving forward on, we've gotten quotes for the gazebo to do the concrete work.
Good.
And an erection of the steel also. We will be working sometime in September on the retention pond in Zone Way, adding another wick to that. That will be done in-house. We are starting tomorrow, if the contractor is true to his word and is moving the ramp in front of Town Hall. And we will have the side entrance will be used by the public for the time period while they widen the ramp and install ADA pipe rail to meet the current code.
Do you have a target date to finish that?
We hope to be finished, I'm going to say by the end of September. The railing is the item out there that is outside of the contractor's direct control, but he assures us that we will have that done in a timely fashion. We are, as part of that community development block grant project, we were also looking at replacing the lift to the second floor. After some frustrating times with the original contractor and getting that they could not meet the requirements that we needed. The second level contractor, we've met with them. They have a number of issues that neither the engineer staff or myself feel comfortable with. One of them being the well of the money up front. Before they ever order the project, which pretty much at this point in time has killed the deal.
You think?
Yeah, so we are moving forward with the grant, and we will do the phase 1 that we're completing and talk to the administrator at the grant program and see if we can carry this on in another year when we can find a company that can meet our requirements or look at alternatives.
I think I know the answer to this, but we're not having trouble paying bills or anything,
No.
I don't think.
No.
Why do they want all the money up front?
They are mainly in the private industry side, and
Yeah, but even in private industry, you do a portion.
which is one of my red flags. They should be able to carry us for 30 days, order the product to go here, and we talked to them about the guarantee of the purchase order voucher. And they have not reneged from their requirement. So at this point in time, we're moving forward and we'll apply for another grant in a year. That's all I have today.
Any questions from the committee, Mr. Kramer?
I've got two. How do things stand with Court and Woodland? Has that gone?
It's going very well. They've had 3 sessions up there. Minor adjustments here and there. A few problems with getting people acclimated, but we have directions and we have signs along the way to get them there. but overall, it has gone well.
And the only other thing I was going to ask was the Hawkins Road property. Have we done anything in terms of looking at liquidating that? I know the committee had discussed interest in that. Have we done any work on that also?
I've asked that that be, have done some preliminary work with an auction company, and I'm waiting to hear some information back from them. And I've asked if we could just hold on that for a while till we finish what our drainage design is for that particular area, just in case we need a portion of the property for drainage.
Chief Kennard had a question about the bond and the chief's vehicle. I believe that's covered under a previous bond, is that?
Yes, sir.
Could you update Chief Kennard on that?
18.6?
Yes.
Yes. It is in bond ordinance 2018-6.
I just saw that and I wasn't sure, thank you.
That's okay.
And also, Doug, there was a question about how long LaShawn has been acting land development board secretary and office clerk.
She has been acting land development board secretary as the statute requires the clerk since July 1st. Margaret stepped in.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Fraser? Mr. Lang?
Mayor, thank you. I'm compelled, I think, to utilize my time to revisit the issue with respect to the ordinance on executive session minutes. Mr. Lee understandably didn't want to vote in the affirmative, having not heard my explanation or some of the discussion regarding that ordinance. As I indicated, that it is a proactive effort. You know, LaShawn and I take very seriously our duty to serve the public, and contrary to certain perceptions, are very seriously our duty under the Open Public Meetings Act and Open Public Records Act, and we work closely to discharge those duties to the best of our ability. So even though some demands or requests could be made with respect to certain issues, even if it's not apparent in our view if there's been any violation or failure to follow the law, we like to approach these things with a conciliatory approach, with an idea towards trying to make everybody satisfied and to create a understanding among the public that our beliefs as to the merit of those statutes and our obligations to conform with them are paramount in the way we conduct ourselves. So we did, even though the litigation I don't think would have resulted in anything like that, agree proactively to adopt the ordinance, because there's no reason, quite frankly, not to, in order to make it clear. So we did prepare that ordinance, and consistent with the consent order, and we agreed in the consent order to adopt that ordinance by tonight's date. So I had prepared it. It was circulated last month. I did explain in the course of my discussions that the criticism, or I should say not criticism, but the suggested revision made by Mr. Lewis, the attorney for Ms. Brooks, indicated that there would be some inherent conflict between paragraphs 2 and 11 as it concerns meetings. And as I pointed out, paragraph 2 indicates that the committee will meet on an as-needed basis, and paragraph 11 indicates that they'll review, whether there's a meeting or not, on a quarterly basis at a minimum those minutes, and consistent with the rest of the scheme of the ordinance. So given that we indicated that we would, in fact, adopt that by tonight's meeting, I'm concerned that a failure to do so is going to spawn more litigation, that there'll be a quick, hasty, I would argue, motion to enforce because we have not completed what we represented we would in the consent order. So with those explanations and that background, I'm curious as to whether or not the committee would revisit that vote, again, to avoid further litigation, a motion to enforce that we would be open to if we don't follow through on our promise to adopt it. If there are other changes or other issues that need to be discussed in order to make everyone feel comfortable, I'm happy to conduct a discourse now and see if we can get to that. So, Steve, is there anything else that I haven't touched on that would you'd like to cover. And again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything other than to indicate that I am concerned about us not following through with representations we made in the consent order and adopting that before tomorrow when we agreed that we would do so. And I indicated, and the judge allowed us the time, because I said we have an abbreviated summer schedule, we wouldn't get to a second reading until tonight. So of course we represented that we would adopt it tonight, but it failed unexpectedly, at least from my view. So with that, is there any opportunity that we can discuss that again?
I'm going to respond to that, two things. Number one, in 9 years, I don't think I've ever been questioned publicly from anyone sitting here at the table on any of my votes on the committee. I think that was, I was actually shocked by that, number one. I've always been questioned by the public on votes that I've made, but never by any of our professionals and never by any of my colleagues here at the table. So I'm a little disappointed that occurred this evening. But as I understand it, the motion passed at a 2-to-1 vote. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, it doesn't pass because it's not a majority of the committee. It's not a majority of the committee, so it did not pass. And so that's my concern, that we're violative of the consent order.
Is it majority of the committee or majority of the committee present?
It's a majority of the committee when it comes to an
All right, so
ordinance.
then let's make a phone call and get other members on the board.
We can do that, and again,
So if
it's
he
not
doesn't
my
want to change his
practice.
vote, I'm not going to
It's
force
not
him
my
to change his vote. No, I'm saying, you have a right to vote the way you want. If that's the situation and you need more votes, then I'm sure Mr. Yates and Mr. Moore can be reached by telephone, and we reach out and see if you can pass it that way.
And Mr.
rather
Lee,
than-
it's not my practice to bring up the issues and make those issues public, and I'm having to do this here because I don't want there to be an unintended or unknown consequence.
You try.
And I actually am concerned about conducting that vote that fashion, Ken, because they haven't participated in the meeting, they haven't heard all of this. And so to now.
We can go back and revisit the entire conversation. We can have Sean read exactly what was stated by Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, who brought up points. The question that I asked you to answer Mr. Brooks's and Mrs. Brooks's point as to the conflict with it. I'm sure we can get that done. If this is a deadline that needs to be done tonight,
Well,
and
I'm
this was
sure
a
the
problem,
court
I
would
mean-
grant us more time. I'm not positive, but I would think that the court would grant us more time to revisit it and bring it up again. But ultimately, we did indicate that we would pass such an ordinance, and there was a deadline that we agreed to.
What would have happened if I didn't come to meeting tonight?
We wouldn't have had a meeting tonight.
Right, so then what would you have
we
told
would've
the
been in
court?
same position.
I mean, we'd be in the same position, so what's the difference?
Well, that's true. I would have been able to explain to the court that we failed to have a quorum and couldn't take action. And again, it's not my intention to question your vote, Mr. Lee, in public, and I don't do that, but I'm concerned here that we're going to spawn additional litigation. I don't know whether Ms. Brooks and Mr. Lewis are going to be that aggressive, but at some point we have to visit and adopt an ordinance and consistent with the consent order.
Okay. Peter, since unfortunately Mr. Yates is out, so he's not able to be here. Mr. Moore's on vacation. Could you contact the court and let them know that we didn't have a full board and that it was a 2-1 vote and that we would reschedule it for the next meeting, which is our workshop meeting on September 9th.
do you have enough time there? Okay.
And we could revisit it.
Sure, I can make that request. It's likely that the court would be accommodating, understand local government and the challenges that can present itself.
Yeah. I mean,
Again,
that's the
I'm compelled to bring it up and talk about it. I can't have there be something, a motion filed, and I didn't advise you as to the potential consequence, so.
Well, to be clear, I wasn't going to vote on something that I wasn't here for.
And I understand.
And that's why I didn't vote.
And I support you in that regard. At the same time,
I probably could have
I have
abstained.
this
Wouldn't have made a
quandary.
difference. I could have abstained. That's probably the only thing I would have done differently.
So I think that it's likely that the judge would grant us that additional time under the circumstances. I can't be sure. But again, not raising the issue, would have been inappropriate. So at this point, there have to be some change and that could be re-advertised. So that's what I'll explain to the court and Mr. Lewis, and I'm sure that they recognize we're acting in good faith and it's our intention to go forward. And ultimately, that's what matters. And we'll keep it on the front burner.
Okay. Anything else, Peter?
No, sir.
Okay. Our OEM coordinator, Mr. Sudbury.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, Robert.
I wanted to ask the will of the Township Committee, since we passed the special events ordinance. Specifically, there's two organizations that on an annual basis put in a special events request for their events. The first being Holy Eucharist, and the second of all being the Scouts with their annual fall festival. So I did put in a place for 501c3s to declare their 501c3 status, but I wanted to know the will of the committee as to whether or not they wish to charge Holy Eucharist and the Scouts $75 fee to hold their events, or whether or not they would like to waive the fees for those two not-for-profit organizations within the township. It is up to you folks, but I wanted to ask the question.
It's a legitimate question.
It's probably an appropriate question for one.
Well, I was gonna say, historically, when we have applications come before us that come from nonprofits, that's a request that's made by the nonprofit at the time.
Right.
That's,
Since I'm new to the process.
no, I'm just saying, you'll see that with the Endurers and
I wanted
things, so.
to raise some questions. Okay. Second of all, we should have received about $97,000 from Winter Storm Quinn. Has that come across yet? Because
Not
I
to my
know
knowledge.
FEMA had told me that they paid that out, the portion that FEMA's dragging their feet on, and they always pay last.
97,000?
$97,000.
I would have noticed that, but I will.
They are telling me they won't. Okay. So, but that was for Winter Storm Quinn, reimbursing us for our labor within the Public Works Department and the contracted labor. Okay. The volunteer labor, which is about $12,000, is always the last thing they pay. So they haven't sent me a note saying they've paid that yet. The other thing that I wanted to let the committee know is that in terms of the fiscal year 2018 Emergency Management Performance Grant Program, we are getting, based on the prior salaries from OEM, nearly the full $10,000, I mean $9,535.24 in reimbursement in grants for emergency management performance, adhering to their training and participation in activities. And we're also, the beginning of November, we're going to be hosting a flu clinic for the 5 surrounding municipalities, which is going to be a full-scale free flu shot, okay, primarily for adults. And we're going to be treating it as if we have a true pandemic. The health department, county's going to be involved, all the major organizations, fire, EMS, public works, traffic flow, and so there's going to be a large full-scale exercise. I just wanted to get it on the radar that exciting event is going to be up and coming, and is a great test of our preparedness should an actual pandemic occur, and we actually need not just to give pills, but to administer injections to protect people. So,
Do an approximate date.
yeah, it's Saturday. I think it's the first Saturday in November. I think it's November 5th. I have to check. I have flyers to circulate also for that.
First Saturday in November is actually the first or second.
Oh, then it'd be just the following Saturday.
Yeah, it's the second. November the 2nd. Bob, has anybody ever done shingles vaccines on a large scale like that?
No, not that I'm aware of. Flu is the most common thing because every fall we come into flu season, and it's something that everybody needs the flu shot, not everybody needs the shingles vaccine. But that would be something that I think, everybody should have, especially if they've had the chicken pox, obviously. Shingles is a very nasty condition to come down with. So, Any further questions, folks? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, Township Committee good night.
I did a little bit of legwork and actually had a discussion with Pete regarding our franchise agreement with Comcast. And there's nothing that prevents Verizon from doing cable TV service on the existing fiber lines. That is a matter of having a discussion with Verizon and seeing if they're willing to do it, which means visit with Sylvia DeVecchio and Jennifer Young, who's the government affairs coordinator for South Jersey. So if we do want to pursue that, I would need to schedule, at the pleasure of the committee, I would need to schedule a meeting with them to have that discussion, which I'm willing to do. The other component of that is I'm kind of curious to know how things have progressed in the other, phase 2, 3, and 4. I spoke with Sammy earlier today, and he indicated that a lot of the infrastructure had been laid out, but nothing's been connected yet, at least at his end of Moore's Meadows. So what I think makes sense is to sit down with them and just kind of get an update in terms of where we are with getting a lot of these areas that are connected, or the connected areas that are laid out connected, number one. And number two, see what the pleasure is of Verizon to go ahead and give us television over those fiber lines. So that will, I'm willing to do that. I just need to get some consensus from the committee to do that.
You okay with that? Good with Stephen.
I met with our former senator, former state senator, now Congressman Jeff Andrew today. He's interested in coming out to Tabernacle in October or so to visit the municipality or visit the area. And once I get some more details about that, I'll let the committee know. That's all I have.
Thank you. Committee been late. Deputy Mayor Brennan.
Just to follow up on what you were wondering, they were running the lines down Flyett this week, last week.
They weren't.
So I'm assuming that's with all the Verizon trucks and all the.
Yeah, have they done anything going, Doug, have they done anything going?
They were working today on Medford Lakes Road.
Okay.
They had been somewhere on the west side, but mostly east of 206.
Yeah, there's nothing, other than bringing the line from Medford, they're not doing anything on the west side.
I think that's what did. The only thing I saw of them was running the line straight down the road.
Okay.
They were up to here, just short of Town Hall this afternoon.
Okay. I'm going to ask a member of the audience a question. Mr. Lemire, have they finished working on Washington Way?
2 weeks ago, yep.
2 weeks ago?
No, weeks ago, maybe
Okay.
2 months ago. It's all done.
Okay, so they haven't been back since. Okay. And you're phase 4, so we ought to have some answers.
They were just running lines, I don't know.
They've been doing that quite a bit. They've got a
Yeah.
lot of, Mark was upset because he couldn't cut his grass, or he had to dodge the
No, they
flood.
cut my cable twice, actually, in the process.
Right, yeah, I knew it was something, they cut something. But anyway, the moral of the story is that they've gotten a lot of stuff out, but we need to nail down where they are.
Anything else? Good? Okay, thank you. We received an email that the Tabernacle Sun has a new reporter, and
Yeah.
Crystal Nurse.
Yeah.
Crystal, welcome to Tabernacle Township. It's nice to meet you. And she replaces Andrew, who used to be here quite regularly, and you're the associate editor, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, welcome and congratulations to your new area. As far as Carranza Road, I was not able to get a meeting with the Deputy Commissioner, Joe Bartoni, but was able to get in contact with Director of Government and Community Affairs. I believe it's her title, her name is Zenobia Fields. And basically, I'm asking her if it would be possible to modify the discretionary grant that we put in and scale it back to a point that would get us out to Moore's Meadow Road. So We haven't gotten a reply on that whole grant. The grant originally was $1.9 million. By scaling it back, if they allow us to resubmit that and consider that. But we haven't seen anything from them as far as
We have not.
go or no go, right? Okay. So that's where we are with Carranza Road. In the beginning of the year, we changed our format and we have workshops. Our next workshop is September the 9th. And this is going to be Committeeman Lee and Committeeman Yates. Last year on this committee, unless sometime in the future, they run again and get reelected. And one of the items that was brought up in the beginning of the year to visit was the Tabernacle Fire Company's contract. So I would ask everyone to be prepared at that workshop to think about what we want in that contract and how we can best deliver fire services in Tabernacle Township. With that,
How is my term related to that question?
okay.
How is my term and Joe's term related to that question?
Well, it'd be nice to take advantage of your expertise. You've been here for a long time. And Stephen, as you know, in all the years I've been on here, we've talked about emergency services. And if it gives us an opportunity to take advantage of everyone's expertise and hopefully get a better contract in place to deliver services in a better fashion.
So Mayor, if I could just interrupt for a moment and indicate that in my review of the statute, I don't see anything in particular that requires a majority of the committee. My understanding has always been an ordinance had to be adopted by a majority of the committee.
Okay.
So I will revisit that issue and conclusively answer that question under Robert's rules and otherwise to determine the effect of tonight's vote. But certainly my preference would be that it be adopted by a majority of the committee. And in any event, that has been my understanding. So I'll go back and check on that. So with that caveat, this issue will be back one way or another.
Okay. So if it is permissible, we're good, right? We got it. We met the deadline.
Yeah. If in fact
If not, we're gonna have
two
to ask.
votes adopts an ordinance, again, and I just want to be certain that that's the case. I suspect that it takes 3 votes to adopt an ordinance, given my prior understanding, but looking at Title 40 personally sitting here, I don't see that specific language. I think it's in the voting or other sections of the ordinance, of the statute. So I'll get back to the clerk on that issue. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to go into executive session. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Section 231 permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas this body is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, and whereas the governing body wishes to discuss personnel matters involving the terms and conditions of employment and performance of Sean Barber, the acting Land Development Board Secretary and Office Clerk, Records Management, and also litigation matters related to GRC complaint number 2019-18, Brooks vs. Township of Tabernacle pursuant to Open Request 7/2/2015. Whereas minutes will be kept, and once the matter involving confidentiality of the above no longer requires that confidentiality, then the minutes can be made public. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the public will be excluded from this meeting. Also, after the executive session, we will reopen the meeting in which current action may or may not be taken. We will be run downstairs, so everyone is welcome to stay there. Thank you.
Can I have a motion
Yeah, I'm out too.
for the resolution on the park?
Family well?
Mayor, I didn't get the motion.
So moved.
Oh, really? What's the problem with that? Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
Lee, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Even from that, I keep telling myself that, and then
You fix yourself eventually.
Go back to the attorney general. Keep going back to the attorney general. Just go to the attorney general for everything. It's like, I don't need to. This stage, we usually have like a immediate person that I should.
I don't want to do it tonight.
Do we need a motion to come out of exec?
Yes.
They're already out.
Okay.
Did you join us, Scott?
Yep.
I'm ready.
Oh, there you go. I didn't see you over there. Sorry about that. Okay, public comment. If anyone has any public comments, please come forward and state your name and address. Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Stuart Brooks, 78 Moores Meadow Road. Got a number of comments. First, I'd like to welcome Chief Kennard, Chief Andy Kennard, who I learned today when he made public comments that he's the new fire chief. Second part of that comment, I'm really surprised that the mayor and committee didn't announce his elevation to that position when it happened back in, I believe, Memorial Day. I mean, just to congratulate him and welcome to the community in that position it's important information, and it's a good thing to do. I wish that would have happened. Second comment regarding 2019-8, the bond ordinance. I would urge the committee to be cautious with that. I'm referring to Mr. Haynes, CFO Haynes's comments at the budget hearing that bonds are essentially eating up the budget. My words, not yours, but that was the sense I took from it. This is a bond ordinance for roads and other equipment. I'm sure they're important and not frivolous, but I would urge you to be cautious and in second reading to review it closely to see exactly what is needed and not allow what's excessive. Third, regarding Carranza Road, I've stood before you many, many times, and I'm still anxious to hear a plan for how that's going to be done. At the last meeting, Committeeman Lee asked a question regarding how could bonding be affected by that. That's the second committee man to ask that question, essentially, can the township bond for it? Committeeman Moore asked the question before that twice. Mr. Haynes answered the question saying, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, that's a legal question. 3 times you said that's a legal question. I asked that question 3 times in meetings past. When I asked the question at sidebar to your solicitor, he said, well, no one's ever asked me to answer that question. So if you're formulating a plan for Carranza Road, that would be a route that you might explore. It might be a dead-end route, but it's a good question to ask. Can you bond for it? Rather than, in my words, dithering about it and not asking that question, ask the question. Get an answer. Maybe that opens up opportunities. Maybe it doesn't. Another opportunity, if you're going to go back to DOT and ask to modify or curtail your application, maybe you could take the opportunity to strengthen the application that you put in to explain all the state facilities that are out that way, that are connected. There's a lot more that you could do to strengthen that application. If you get a second bite at the apple, this would be a chance to take it. As to, I guess it's Resolution 2019-7, the ordinance, honestly, Pete, I didn't understand your explanation that there might be times when the committee will review, but there might be times when the committee wouldn't meet. I mean, that subcommittee is only going to meet to review. Just in the interest of clarity, why not make those two paragraphs the same? It just seems simple and clear. I just don't understand the distinction you were getting to. There might actually be a distinction between meeting as needed and reviewing quarterly, but that's just so, it seems to me, just my opinion, it seems to me that so overcomplicates things. The committee is going to meet quarterly and or as needed in order to review the minutes to release them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anyone else from the public? Yeah.
Jim Jones, 16 years away. I understand the committee is floating the idea of advertising for an applicant for OEM to replace Mr. Sunday. I think that's a terrible waste of time and effort right now. He has a contract. There is a question about conflict of interest. I understand that question has been asked of government authorities, and until that's resolved, he has a job. Whether he's on the committee or not. I think he's doing a great job. Perhaps not the same as Corculo. Different people do it differently. I'm questioning whether or not there's some other agenda that we're not aware of, and that bothers me a great deal. That job should not be political. It's a job that's done to provide a vital service to this community, and it's being done very well, in my opinion. I have some experience in the area, but not perhaps as much as a lot of other people, certainly not currently. I guess the bottom line is, I don't know why people would want to advertise for replacement when there is no need for a replacement right now. No identifiable need. There is no identified conflict of interest. He hasn't even been elected yet, although it's a high probability, everything considered. So it's likely to happen. But there's nothing that says he can't do both jobs. And I would suggest to the committee that if you're actually floating that thing, that you reconsider it and kill it before it gets out again. It needs to be killed.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else?
Mayor, I'm going to respond to that, okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Jones, I want to just kind of share with you a couple thoughts.
Sure.
I made the recommendation to the committee that we hire Bob. And that was after a very long process. We actually had to go through 2 series. We actually had to interview for the position twice. We didn't have to. We made that choice. So it was a long process to get to Bob. There's a lot of boxes to check off when it comes to hiring someone for that type of a position. And I thought it made sense. I'm planning on Bob being elected in November, number one. We'll leave it at that. And my push was to advertise for the position so we could have a game plan in place to be able to move forward if the event that Bob had to step down as the OEM coordinator. So it was all, from my perspective, it was all for a proactive approach when it came to having our ducks in a row if in the event that we needed to fill that position.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
I would surmise that government, supposedly other than full-time people, would be understanding if you had a man in that position and it was declared a conflict of interest, that he was held over as you were actively seeking a replacement. I'm not a legislator, I'm not a lawyer, but I have to believe that that would happen. If it didn't, then the people in Trenton ought to be run out of town. Maybe it should be anyway, for other reasons. But I'm not sure that that's insurmountable. Just a concern.
Mr. Sundberg?
Bob Summery, 33 Sleepy Hollow. 2 quick things. One, if it were determined that there were a conflict of interest, or even if I was holding both positions, I would only take the salary. That would, whatever would benefit the township the most. I wouldn't be collecting dual salaries, and I would work to alleviate any conflict of interest, but if there was, I would only hold that until we could find a successor that would be suitable for the position. So I would never want to stay in a position that would be detrimental. The only reason that I even want to be OEM for this community is the fact that I love this community, I care about these people, and I want to do my best to help protect them. That's the only reason. The other question I had is, I was made aware at the last meeting that we failed to get the number of votes necessary to apply for a grant for $625,000, perhaps in relation to Carranza Road having not been settled, although perhaps that grant, if we addressed it early enough, could have included Carranza Road. But to the detriment of the township losing what we would normally receive in grant money in terms of $625,000, is there any recourse that we have to rethink that and obtain that money that we would have for road improvements within the township without squandering that opportunity? Thank you.
Dan, could you answer that question? Would we have another bite at the apple? Is there time if we were to pass the resolution?
So the resolution is required to be submitted, the official resolution passed and submitted within 30 days of the application, which, you know, the deadline for the application was the beginning of this month. So we may be able to get an extension to that if the committee wanted to reconsider it from DOT, but I can't guarantee
that. Mrs. Brooks?
Thank you. Fran Brooks, Moore's Meadow, just quickly with regard to Carranza. Carranza Road hasn't been done for over 35 years. Every road in this town has already, except for Carranza Road, and it has. And by the way, Carranza Road has the lowest rating on the road evaluation report that Mr. Guzzi put together. It is time to finish Carranza Road. If you would just get it done, instead of being so obstinate about it, you could have done it in one of the grants, and that was submitted by Mr. Guzzi, and it probably would have ended this whole controversy, because I know you are, even though you had a contradiction in what you said on the record the other day, at the last meeting, Mayor Barton, you're for it, but you're not supporting finishing the road. You already spent the grant covering Chemung, so what's the difference? We give all this money away to Chemung, they don't pay a dime to support our TRS building, or the TRS, the Emergency Services Building, everybody calls it the TRS building. They don't pay a dime. We, Tabernacle residents, pay for Chemung residents for all the transports. So you ought to move off that dime and just finish the darn road and get this problem behind you, because we're going to, I guarantee you, every meeting I will be here complaining about the fact the road isn't done and talking about maintenance. There's no maintenance of that road. You fill the holes, and within 3 days the holes are opened up again because it's all solid sand. I mean, it's shameful what you've done, and exposing everybody to it, and exposing the liability and also the embarrassment of Carranza Memorial, the celebration. So, you know, it's time to just get it done and stop applying for other roads. They can wait. They haven't waited for 35 years to have a decent road. The other point I'd like to make is I think we have a little bit of revisionist history with regard to Mr. Mr. Lang's statements. First of all, Mr. Lang, you had nothing to do with the consent order with regard to the ordinance. That was Mr. Lorzen, under my recommendation, that you take a resolution that had to do with closed session minutes and you convert it to an ordinance so that it has some power, so we as the people can make a comment about it. It's shameful, it's just simply shocking, the comments that you made about supporting Oprah and OPMA, because the township, I mean, would go for years, and I can document it, and that's why the suit came about, was because closed session minutes were not being approved, and you were not advising the clerk, I have no idea whether you were advising the clerk of this committee that they were in extreme violation of, in violation, you're either in or you're not, in violation of OPMA and OPRA, and so you haven't been doing your job. And why should we have to pay, excuse me,
Mrs. Brooks,
why should we have to pay?
Mrs. Brooks,
Don't-
please address this committee.
He
If
should
you
be
have a
up there,
problem
they're
with
not
our
gonna address
solicitor,
him.
address the
Well,
committee.
you hired him.
We
You-
do.
You
If you
hired
have a problem with
him,
our
and the fact of the
professionals,
matter
address
is
the
that
committee.
Mr. Lang is not telling the truth regarding the ordinance, and I find it offensive that he would take credit for an ordinance he had nothing to do with. It was our recommendation that, and it was put into the consent order to which you agreed. So he shouldn't be claiming that he's taking, it's proactive when it was, we were the ones who did the ordinance.
Okay.
It's just shameful. And everything is in this consent order, so if you're in conformance with the consent order, there should be no problems with closed session minutes. Anyone can, once you approve them, they should be made available by open request to, you can give it out if you want. And we shouldn't even have to go through what we went through tonight. I mean, the law is, he should know the law. It's absurd that you could not adopt this. If you had done your homework and even read the consent order, you would see what the issue is with the ordinance, and there was plenty of time to take care of it. It's just shameful. It's shameful. The waste of our money is shameful.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
I wish you'd do your job, Mr. Lang.
Mr.
Pay you
Blarney, I
enough
was-
money.
When you're done, when public comment is closed, can I respond?
Yeah, we're closing public comment. It's closed.
You have to have the last word, don't you, Mr. Lang? Typical of an attorney.
The facts are that your clerk, Sean, prior to the litigation, had proposed in the form of a resolution essentially exactly what's being adopted and codified as an ordinance. So the clerk should get the credit for, again, demonstrating her conviction to the purposes and intents of the statute and being proactive, and in fact bringing that to the committee, asking you to adopt it in the form of a resolution, which was done long before any litigation was instituted. So again, in an effort to reinforce that intent and the purpose, we agreed as an accommodation to adopt it in the way of an ordinance. So LaShawn actually was way out ahead and made a good faith effort to deal with this issue prophylactically.
Rodney, the question has been asked many times, and we've talked about this, as far as bonding for another municipality's facilities.
Yes, and I will confirm this again with our bond attorney, but look at it this way, is the road, only half the road is an asset of the township. So I look at it as, will a bank give you a mortgage to build an addition on your neighbor's house? Nothing else. Basically, the bondholders could object to the use of those funds for another town's assets, but I will confirm it again.
Okay. And just to be clear, on the record, my position on Carranza Road, yes, I would like to see Carranza Road paved, and as I said, I don't think a dime of Tabernacle's tax dollars should go towards the Chemung Township side of the road. And as I said before, the folks that have a problem with Carranza Road on the Chemung side should take that up with Chemung. If there's potholes and problems on their side of the road, they should be contacted and have them repair that side of the road. If there's problems on our side, contact us, we will take care of our side of the road. So my position is very clear. Yes, the road is in dire need of being paved, but we only own half the road. We don't own the other half of the road. We've already taken a state grant and paved most of the road on both sides. And I'm sure the day will come that we'll be taking a task for not recovering those costs from Chemung Township. If this was any other road, I'm sure that everybody would feel the same way. And we only have one other road, to the best of my knowledge, in town, is Tucker Road. Is that right, Doug?
Tucker Road is divided between the two townships.
Right. And we did do exactly what we wanted to do here, right, Doug? We both applied for a grant, and we paid both sides of the road, and they used an equal amount of the grant from their grant, and we matched it with our grant. And that was the goal and the hope to do here. That did not happen, so we applied for a discretionary grant with the state NJDOT. And we haven't heard the last word on that grant application as of today.
Friendship School actually is in 3 different municipalities.
Right.
There's Woodland, there's Washington, and Tabernacle.
Right.
But I concur with your point.
And when we paid that, we did that in conjunction with Woodland Township, and they paid for their portion, we paid for ours.
Okay, at this time, before we close the meeting, I'd like to introduce the resolution to revisit the New Jersey municipal grant for the paving, and I'd like to make a motion that we approve Doug to file that application, and I would ask for a second in the discussion.
I'll second it. I just want to go to Dan and see if he can go there at this point.
I think we can. That resolution didn't have the votes to pass. If we pass the resolution, I can submit it to the DOT and see if they'll accept it. You know, it's late. Although right now we're still, I think, right around that 30-day period. So I think that's typically.
And LaShawn, if we were to do that, would that be resolution 2019-98?
I believe it is. I don't have it in front
Okay,
of me.
I'm looking at our agenda. We finished with 97.
Do you have your minutes in front of you?
Yes.
Your draft minutes?
Yeah.
Which
So the
roads
last
are you
resolution
proposing to
passed tonight
pave?
was 2019-97. So if the committee would approve this, could you draft the resolution of 2019-98 so that Mr. Dudley could apply for that grant?
Which roads?
The application was for
To finish Oak Shade
Phase 2 of Oak Shade Road.
And parts of Prickett's Mill.
and then parts of Pickens.
Any further discussion from the committee?
So you essentially want to, the resolution, can you be more specific about what we're doing?
So the resolution is the resolution that basically.
I mean, I was actually, with all due respect, I was actually answering Joe. No, it's okay. It's okay.
It's the same resolution we had last month that did not pass. The language would be the same. The difference would be the resolution 2019-98.
That's what I was asking you to be very specific about. This, for the record, that's all I was asking.
There should actually be 2 resolutions. We did it in 2, and last we did 2984 was the approval of Phase 2 of Oak Shade Road, and 1985 was the resolution to do first phase of Prickett's Mill. So would you want them separate?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so resolution 2019-98 would be phase 2, Doug,
Phase 2 of Oak Shade Road.
of Oak Shade Road. We'll do that one first.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mayor Barton?
Yes.
No shame, no shame. There's no shame in this committee.
Okay, I'd like to
Mrs. Brooks, you're out of order.
Oh,
like to introduce
listen.
resolution 2019-99, and
That would be the authorization to submit the grant application, execute the grant contract for the DOT waiting for Phase 1 of Prickett's Mill road repair.
okay, so 2019-99 would be a resolution to apply for the NJDOT grant for phase 1 of Prickett's Mill Road. And again, it would be the same language as the ordinances that, or the resolutions that did not pass last month.
And you're making that motion, Mayor, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? No. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mayor Barton?
Yes.
Mayor, I'd like to just clarify, Peter asked me why I voted no earlier tonight, so I'll take the opportunity to say why I'm voting no now. I made a commitment some years ago to do whatever I could to get Crayons Road paved. In fact, I remember publicly stating that I wasn't going to vote on any more bond resolutions or applications for any other road but Crayons Road. And I feel committed to, I made that statement. I felt pretty strong about that. I try to be a person of principle. I recognize the work that Dan did in terms of putting the application together. I recognize that those roads need to be done as well, but I made a commitment that I thought Crayons Road ought to be done. It was a bold commitment that I made that I wanted to do Crayons Road before we've done anything else, and that's why I'm voting no in this case.
Appreciate it, Steve. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So much.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thanks for the snacks.
Nothing you will do, Mr. Barton, will change the situation. You know that? Nothing you do, Mr. Barton, will change the situation. You have not told the truth. I have a right to talk to you.
You're not talking to me.
I'm talking to you because I'm standing right in front of you. You said you can't take the truth. You can't take the truth. I think this is a private, and also I have my First Amendment rights. You're right, I do. Revisionist history, Mr. Lang, revisionist history. It's so sad. It really is sad.
Yeah, it is.
So pathetic, actually. Poor Mr. Barton, he just can't take the heat. He should get out.
Pipe detail as well.